What if one of the world's most talked about public figures just tanked a multi-million-dollar Netflix deal from the inside? At first, it looked like just another celebrity passion project, a second season, some creative tweaks, maybe a bit of drama. But behind the scenes, something much darker was unfolding. We're talking about internal investigations, scrapped scripts, and a total creative shutdown that left Netflix executives stunned and scrambling. And at the center of it all, Meghan Markle. This wasn't just a case of bad storytelling. What Netflix uncovered in her private notes raised serious questions, not just about the show, but about Meghan herself. It started the way most scandals do, quietly. No headlines, no whispers. Just a few strange reports trickling up the chain at Netflix about behind-the-scenes tension on With Love, Meghan Season 2. At first, executives thought it was just the usual production stress. But as complaints grew louder, they decided to take a closer look. That's when everything changed. Netflix launched a discreet internal investigation. What they found sent shockwaves through the executive floor. Scripts were being delayed. Scenes were rewritten without notice. And Meghan? She was reportedly making sweeping creative decisions without consulting producers, often late at night, leaving handwritten notes and outlines scattered across her office. The tone of the show was shifting in bizarre directions, and no one seemed to have a clear explanation why. Then came the decision that stunned everyone. Meghan Markle was officially stripped of creative control. No soft landing. No carefully worded press release. Just a cold, hard reset. For a platform like Netflix, known for taking big risks on big names, this was unprecedented. And it raised one major question. What exactly had Meghan been planning behind closed doors? When Netflix cleared out Meghan's office, they weren't expecting to find a creative minefield. But what they uncovered went far beyond eccentric brainstorming. Tucked between meeting notes and early script drafts were deeply personal ideas, the kind that made even veteran producers do a double take. One concept involved old pregnancy videos. Meghan had planned to include footage of herself dancing in her kitchen while lip-syncing to rap music, filmed years ago while she was pregnant. The idea? To play those clips in the background of scenes while she cooked, turning a family moment into a scripted centerpiece. Executives were baffled. It didn't feel authentic. It felt like a personal phone gallery repackaged as premium content. They weren't just confused by the idea itself, but by how confident Meghan seemed in its inclusion. And that wasn't the only eyebrow raiser. Stacks of sticky notes described other concepts that read more like diary entries than TV material. Personal affirmations, childhood reflections, even dreams she'd had, all loosely tied into episode arcs that made no narrative sense to the production team. To the writer's room, it looked like chaos. But to Netflix, it was a red flag. A sign that this show wasn't heading toward innovation, it was steering straight into disaster. As Netflix dug deeper into Meghan's notes, things went from bizarre to uncomfortably personal. One full episode arc centered around a serious conversation on divorce, not as a background detail, but as the emotional core of an entire storyline. Meghan had written herself into a dramatic sit-down with Mindy Kaling, discussing the toll of broken relationships. On paper, it sounded heartfelt. But producers felt something else entirely. It wasn't storytelling. It was personal baggage. Executives said the tone read more like Meghan working through her own life on camera than crafting content for viewers. The focus wasn't universal, it was singular. Her voice, her pain, her story. And that raised alarms. Then came an even more sensitive subject, alcoholism. One 8-minute segment Meghan drafted aimed to raise awareness. But again, the tone felt off. It wasn't about education or empathy, it felt like a confessional. Even worse, reports surfaced that she had been storing boxes of wine in her trailer, meant for the cast. The irony didn't go unnoticed. Netflix was no stranger to edgy content, but this wasn't edgy. It was erratic. Personal emotion was overtaking plot, and producers knew if it wasn't stopped, the show would spiral beyond saving. What they did next would send the clearest message yet. When Meghan tried to push her controversial scenes into last-minute reshoots, she hit a wall, and this time, it was solid. Ted Sarandos, Netflix's co-CEO, didn't just reject her ideas. He shut them down completely. No meetings, no compromises, no soft letdown. Just a firm and final no. The message was clear. Meghan was out. Not just sidelined, fully removed from the decision-making process. That rejection triggered a wave of behind-the-scenes tension. Meghan, once treated like a creative partner, was now seen as a liability. She reportedly pleaded, argued, and tried to reframe her ideas as visionary, moments that would redefine storytelling. But Sarandos wasn't buying it. And neither was the rest of the leadership team. With pressure mounting and deadlines slipping, Netflix went into full damage control. They brought in new producers, scrapped entire sequences, and pieced together a new direction using what little salvageable material they had left. The original vision? Gone. What had started as a polished, high-budget second season was now a Frankenstein of half-finished scenes and emergency reshoots. Meghan's notes were archived. Her office was emptied. And just like that, one of Netflix's most high-profile projects became a cautionary tale, not about creative risk, but about what happens when a platform loses control of its own narrative. With Meghan out and chaos in her wake, Netflix tried to steer the show back on track. But the damage was already done. Entire episodes had to be restructured. Scenes were missing. Key cast members had moved on due to delays, forcing replacements or rewrites. What was supposed to be a confident sophomore season turned into a desperate patch job, rushed, disconnected, and directionless. There was no clear narrative, no emotional arc, just a pile of scattered footage and a production team scrambling to stitch something together. Reshoots were happening on the fly. Scripts were being reworked mid-scene. In some cases, actors were improvising entire monologues because there simply wasn't time to rewrite. And still, things got worse. One executive described the footage as confusing and cold, while editors admitted privately that some scenes felt like they'd been ripped straight from a personal vlog. Meghan had even broken the fourth wall, unscripted moments where she looked directly into the camera, leaving editors unsure whether it was intentional or just an uncut mistake. Meanwhile, Netflix's PR team was already bracing for fallout. They knew what was coming, a public reckoning. The show wasn't just slipping in quality, it was slipping into something far riskier. A project once backed by star power was now teetering on the edge of reputational disaster. And then, the plagiarism claims surfaced. Just when Netflix thought things couldn't spiral further, they did. Insiders began whispering about eerie similarities between Meghan's script drafts and well-known content from other celebrities. Then came the formal review. Netflix's legal team pored over the material, and what they found raised serious red flags. Entire sections of dialogue, life lessons, and even phrasing in the show's drafts mirrored content from public figures like Gordon Ramsay, Rachel Ray, and Pamela Anderson. Some quotes were pulled nearly word for word from interviews and books that had already been published. This wasn't inspiration, it was near duplication. The fallout was immediate. Legal flagged multiple episodes, forcing even more rewrites. And while Meghan never publicly admitted to copying anything, her credibility inside Netflix took another massive hit. Quiet conversations behind closed doors turned louder. Executives began asking how this project was ever greenlit without stricter oversight. Meanwhile, Meghan was still trying to regain control. She started bypassing senior producers, reaching out directly to editors and junior staff, hoping to sneak her original ideas back into the cut. But word traveled fast. Netflix higher-ups saw it as a breach of trust, a last-ditch attempt to cling to influence in a project that had already slipped out of her hands. What had once been a creative collaboration had now turned into a full-blown containment effort. With her creative input officially shut down, Meghan wasn't ready to walk away quietly. Behind the scenes, she began reaching out to lower-level staff, editors, coordinators, even interns, attempting to reinsert her original concepts into the final cut. Notes slipped through email threads, quiet meetings were requested, and late-night messages tried to spark sympathy. But sympathy was in short supply. Word of her back-channel attempts spread quickly. What was once seen as assertive now looked desperate. Netflix executives were furious, viewing her actions as a clear attempt to override the chain of command. The more she pushed, the more isolated she became. Even her closest allies on set began pulling away. Staff who had once rallied around her vision started distancing themselves, worried that continued association would damage their reputations. Her office, once a buzzing creative hub filled with energy and ambition, became a symbol of the fallout. Silent, empty, stripped of her nameplate and waiting to be reassigned. And as Netflix combed through what was left behind, they found even more of her handwritten episode ideas, many that had never been discussed in any official meeting. Some were quirky, others were completely off-brand. All of them pointed to one thing: Meghan wasn't making a show for an audience. She was making a show for herself. As Netflix sifted through Meghan's abandoned material, the picture became even clearer and more concerning. Buried in the files were concepts that had never been formally pitched, and for good reason. One idea involved a cooking spin-off, where Meghan would experiment with organic recipes while reflecting on social issues. Another outlined a musical-style segment, featuring children's choirs singing about forgiveness, unity, and family healing. To some, it came off as quirky. But to Netflix, it felt completely unhinged from their audience. There was no narrative thread, no tonal consistency, just a mishmash of personal moments repackaged as prestige storytelling. Internally, execs began referring to the material as self-therapy in 4K. The concern wasn't just about content, it was about direction. Meghan was blending reality, performance, and personal emotion in ways that felt more chaotic than creative. One senior producer described her vision as emotionally performative, while another called it unfiltered self-projection with no anchor. And that's when the real fear set in. This wasn't just a show in trouble. This was a brand-threatening misstep. With media already catching wind of internal drama, Netflix knew it was only a matter of time before the story broke. The narrative was slipping out of their hands, and they had to act fast to reclaim it. As rough cuts of the show finally rolled in, Netflix executives braced themselves, and the reaction was worse than expected. The tone was inconsistent. Scenes jumped from moody voiceovers to what felt like unscripted vlog-style monologues. Some moments broke the fourth wall entirely, leaving editors confused about whether it was an artistic choice or a mistake no one caught. The pacing was off, the message unclear. The entire season felt like a patchwork of discarded ideas stitched together at the last minute. Behind closed doors, the mood turned grim. Producers stopped asking how good the show could be. The new question was, can we release this without ruining the brand? Netflix's PR team shifted into overdrive. They knew the truth would eventually leak, that Meghan had been fully sidelined, her influence reduced to archive notes and rejected ideas. So they moved first. Quietly, they fed details to industry publications, reframing the situation as a bold move to protect creative integrity. Internally, they called it controlling the fire before she lights one. But Meghan wasn't staying quiet. In private conversations, she reportedly described the situation as sabotage. She accused Netflix execs of never supporting her vision and even hinted at legal action for creative suppression. What she didn't realize was that the industry had already moved on. While Meghan scrambled to salvage her reputation, the industry quietly turned its back. Sources say she reached out to competing streaming platforms, hoping to strike new deals or pitch fresh content. But no one was biting. Executives who once praised her as a bold new voice were now dodging calls. Former allies in the entertainment press began softening their tone, gently backing away from previous endorsements. No one wanted to be the last one clinging to a sinking ship. What had begun as a golden opportunity to reshape her public image, a post-royal reinvention powered by Hollywood, had collapsed into a behind-the-scenes nightmare. And the damage wasn't just creative. It was reputational. Meghan's name, once considered a draw for media attention and audience intrigue, was now being quietly labeled as radioactive. The final episodes of With Love, Meghan Season 2 remains stuck in post-production limbo. Editors, under pressure, are simply trying to cut anything, that resembles a coherent product. But even off the record, they admit the bar has been drastically lowered. Excellence is no longer the goal. The new mission? Avoid another PR disaster. At Netflix headquarters, Meghan's former office sits silent. Her nameplate gone. Her vision erased. And if there's one thing Hollywood never forgets, it's who costs them time, money, and control. What started as Meghan Markle's big Hollywood comeback has now become one of Netflix's biggest creative regrets. Once positioned as a bold, personal project meant to inspire and challenge norms, with love, Meghan unraveled into a chaotic, off-brand production plagued by personal baggage, creative overreach, and internal controversy. From scrapped scripts and bizarre concept pitches to plagiarism accusations and executive shutdowns, the story behind the scenes became far more dramatic than anything that made it to camera. In the end, Meghan didn't just lose control of her show, she lost the trust of the very industry she was trying to conquer. Netflix may still release a version of Season 2, but insiders admit it's no longer about artistic integrity. It's about damage control, quiet exits, rewritten narratives, and reputations left in limbo. The real question now isn't whether Meghan's show can be salvaged. It's whether her place in Hollywood can. Do you think Meghan's vision was ahead of its time, or just completely out of touch? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Netflix right to shut it down? Or did they sabotage something bigger?